A U.S. Army sergeant and ride-share service driver has been found guilty of the murder of a protester during a Black Lives Matter rally in 2020 in Austin, Texas. The verdict was reached after an 8-day trial and 2 days of deliberation, where the jury found Daniel Perry guilty of murdering Garrett Foster, an Air Force veteran who was participating in the protest. Perry, who is white, was also found not guilty of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. The murder conviction could result in a maximum sentence of life imprisonment. The shooting occurred on the 25th of July 2020, during nationwide demonstrations against the murder of George Floyd. Perry, who was driving for Uber in downtown Austin, reportedly honked at the protesters and drove his car into the crowd. According to Perry's attorneys, Foster approached his car with an AK-47 rifle, and Perry shot him 5 times in self-defense. However, prosecutors argued that Perry had other options during the situation, including driving away before he fired his own gun at Foster. During the trial, prosecutors brought up Facebook messages that Perry sent prior to the shooting, where he wrote about shooting looters and killing protesters. Evidence found on Perry's cell phone included online searches for "Protest Tonight," "Protesters in Seattle Gets Shot," "Riot Shootouts," and "Protests in Dallas Live." Perry's attorneys argued that he was forced to shoot Foster in self-defense, while the prosecutors contended that Perry had other options during the situation. Perry's defense has found an ally in Texas's Republican Governor Greg Abbott, who has already said on Twitter that he is working on pardoning Perry from his conviction, which he called an attempted jury nullification of Texas's self-defense law. This case highlights the ongoing tension and violence that have resulted from the Black Lives Matter movement. While many protesters have been peacefully demonstrating for change and equality, others have faced violence from those who oppose the movement. The verdict in this case provides some measure of justice for Garrett Foster and his family, but it also underscores the need for continued efforts to address racism and injustice in all its forms. This case highlights the ongoing tension between the Black Lives Matter movement and those who oppose it. It also raises important questions about the role of self-defense in cases of violence during protests. While Perry's attorneys argued that he acted in self-defense, prosecutors contended that he had other options and that Foster had a right to approach him with his rifle. The jury ultimately agreed with the prosecution, finding Perry guilty of murder. However, the governor's comments on pardoning Perry have raised concerns about the potential politicization of the case. Critics have accused Abbott of undermining the justice system and disregarding the jury's decision. It remains to be seen how this situation will unfold, but it has already sparked a heated debate about the use of pardons in criminal cases. Subscribe for more content like this. Regardless of the outcome, the tragedy of Garrett Foster's death serves as a reminder of the ongoing struggle for racial justice in the United States. The Black Lives Matter movement continues to demand systemic change and an end to police brutality against Black Americans. While this case is just one example of the challenges that lie ahead, it is also a testament to the resilience and determination of those fighting for a more just and equitable society. The incident that occurred last year in Austin, Texas, during a Black Lives Matter rally, has now ended with a guilty verdict for the driver who fatally shot a protester. Daniel Perry, a 33-year-old Army sergeant and rideshare service driver, was found guilty of murdering Garrett Foster, a 28-year-old Air Force veteran. Perry, who is white, shot Foster, who was also white, 5 times after allegedly being approached by Foster with an AK-47 rifle. The verdict followed an 8-day trial and 2 days of deliberations by a Travis County jury, who found Perry guilty of murder but not guilty of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Perry could face life imprisonment when he is sentenced next week. Despite Perry's attorneys arguing that their client acted in self-defense, prosecutors contended that Perry had other options and could have driven away before firing his weapon. During the trial, evidence was presented of Facebook messages Perry had sent prior to the shooting, including messages threatening violence against protesters. The incident occurred during nationwide protests in response to the murder of George Floyd by a police officer in Minneapolis. Foster had been attending a Black Lives Matter rally when he was killed. The guilty verdict has been seen as a victory for the Foster family and for justice, but Texas's Republican Governor Greg Abbott has expressed his intention to pardon Perry from his conviction. Abbott claimed that the verdict was an attempted jury nullification of Texas's self-defense law and that Perry acted in self-defense. Abbott's statements have been controversial and have received criticism from civil rights groups and others who believe that justice must be upheld. The verdict has also highlighted the ongoing issues surrounding the use of force by law enforcement and civilians during protests and the need for meaningful dialogue and action to address systemic racism and inequality in the United States. It has also brought attention to the need to hold individuals accountable for their actions, regardless of their profession or status in society. The case is a tragic reminder of the continuing struggle for justice and equality in America, particularly for people of color, and of the need for continued efforts to combat racism and discrimination in all its forms. The verdict is a small step towards holding individuals accountable for their actions, but much more needs to be done to ensure that justice is truly served and that all individuals are treated fairly and equally under the law. In conclusion, the murder of Garrett Foster at a Black Lives Matter rally in Austin, Texas, has resulted in the conviction of U.S. Army Sergeant and rideshare service driver, Daniel Perry. The 8-day trial and 2-day verdict deliberation ended with Perry found guilty of murder, but not guilty of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Perry could face life imprisonment for his crime. However, Texas Governor Greg Abbott has announced his intentions to pardon Perry, claiming that the jury's decision was an attempted nullification of Texas's self-defense law. The evidence presented during the trial, including Perry's Facebook messages and online searches for violent protest-related content, suggests that the murder was premeditated. The verdict brings closure and peace to the victim's family and serves as a reminder that violence and hate have no place in peaceful protests. Thanks for watching. Subscribe our channel for authenticity.